It started with a knock. Just one. At exactly 3:15 in the morning. She thought it was the wind until she realized the sound came from inside the house. Evelyn Carter awoke, alone in the quiet of her 1950s home, her husband away on business. The house was still, wrapped in a blanket of fog. She strained her ears, listening for anything out of place. There was only the slow, rhythmic ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. Hesitantly, she slipped out of bed. The old floorboards creaked under her weight as she crept into the hallway. The clock's hands pointed to 3:16 a.m. She checked the front door. It was locked, bolted. No one was there. Shaking her head, she dismissed it as a dream, a trick of the mind in the dead of night. But the next night, it happened again. This time, there were 2 knocks. Louder, more insistent. Evelyn was already awake, her eyes fixed on the clock as it neared the dreaded hour. 3:15. Knock. 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 The sound was hollow, echoing from the front door, as if it were miles away and right beside her at the same time. She held her breath, her heart hammering against her ribs. In a trembling whisper, she called out, "Who's there?" For a long moment, there was only silence, punctuated by the relentless ticking of the clock. Then, a voice, a dry, faint whisper, seemed to slither through the keyhole. Almost home, a cold dread washed over her. The voice hadn't just been outside the door, and that night, the visitor came one step closer. On the 3rd night, she refused to be a victim in her own bed. She dragged a heavy wooden chair in front of the door, her only company a flickering lantern that cast long, dancing shadows down the hallway. Her hands shook as she waited. The house unnervingly silent. The wind howled outside, a mournful sound that seemed to mock her vigil. Then, at exactly 3:15, it came. Knock, knock, knock. 3 distinct, deliberate raps on the wood. Evelyn's breath hitched in her throat. She watched, paralyzed, as the brass doorknob began to turn. Slowly, almost she wanted to scream, to run, but a primal fear pinned her to the chair. The visitor was patient, and closer, desperate for answers. Evelyn went to the local police station the next day. She explained the nightly occurrences, the knocks, the voice. The officer listened with a weary frown, then disappeared into a back room, returning with a dusty, forgotten file. "This house," he began, his voice low and grave. "It belonged to the Whitmores. Years ago, the husband, he died right there, at the front door. It was 3:15 a.m. His wife told everyone he had promised he'd come back, no matter what." He slid the file across the desk. The words swam before Evelyn's eyes. And now, she understood. Every knock wasn't just a sound. There was another promise being kept. The final night arrived with a storm. Rain lashed against the windows, and distant thunder rumbled like a celestial warning. Evelyn barricaded the door with everything she could find: a dresser, chairs, anything to keep the outside world at bay. Every lock was sealed. She sat in the darkness, the lantern her only source of light, its flame flickering precariously. The clock began its slow march toward 3:15. Knock. 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 Knock! She gasped. 4 knocks. The sound wasn't at the door anymore. It was inside the walls, moving, circling her. She scrambled back, away from the source. But the knocking followed, echoing from every corner of the room. One for every wall that trapped her inside. Suddenly, the lantern flickered and died, plunging her into absolute darkness. Silence descended. Then, one final, soft knock, directly behind her. She spun around. The front door stood wide open, and in the oppressive quiet, a man's voice whispered, faintly smiling, "I told you I'd come home." They never found Evelyn Carter. When morning came, the rain had stopped, and pale light filtered through the curtains. The chair she had sat in was empty. The door stood ajar, a single muddy footprint leading inside. But some say, if you listen closely in that old house, every night at 3:15, someone still knocks and comes one step closer. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more tales from the shadows.